The first bill on the calendar for today is House File 2130. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2130, number 5 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to public safety, extending the length of driver's license revocations related to certain offenses.
There is an amendment at the desk. If there is no objection, we will let the author explain the bill before we act on the amendments. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. On the night of September 1st, 2024, Stephen Bailey got behind the wheel of his car with a blood alcohol level of 0.325, more than 4 times the legal limit. He went to Park Tavern in St. Louis Park in my district and very close to Representative Joaquin's district, couldn't find a parking spot, and then drove at high speed through the outdoor patio, killing Park Tavern server Christina Folkerts and Methodist Hospital unit coordinator Gabe Harvey, and injuring 9 other people. His horrific decision left a gaping hole in my community and the Methodist Region's community, and in the lives of so many people, and especially in the lives of the families impacted. Before I go further, I want to recognize there are a number of folks from the Methodist Region's community in St. Louis Park up in the balcony, including Mayor Nadia Mohammed, and also here in the chamber with us, Sarah Vandenberg from Methodist, who is a friend of Gabe and those others impacted. What made this tragedy so much harder was how random it was. If you live in my community, then you have memories at Park Tavern and likely have spent time on that patio. Unbelievably, Bailey had 5 prior Minnesota DWI convictions and another one in Wisconsin. After this tragedy, I began looking into Minnesota DWI statutes from a public safety perspective, especially relative to repeat offenders. What I learned was that most people that commit a DWI offense don't commit a second. But if someone commits a second, the likelihood of committing more goes up quite a bit. From a National Highway Traffic Safety Administration study, 43% of those convicted of DWI in Minnesota were repeat offenders. And in one of the more comprehensive studies on this topic in Maryland, several years ago, compared to drivers with no violations, the rate of committing a new violation was 10.6 times greater for drivers with 2 prior convictions and 14.9 times greater for drivers with 3 or more priors. I also learned about ignition interlock, which is like a breathalyzer for your car, that according to the CDC, ignition interlocks reduce repeat DWI offenses by about 70% while installed. Additionally, I learned that interlock is more effective than license suspension alone, as 50 to 75% of convicted drunk drivers continue driving on a suspended license. Minnesota's current approach to interlock time requirements for repeat offenders is a linear approach. A second offense gets a year or 2 on interlock, third offense 3 years, fourth offense 4 years. But this doesn't match the data for the harm caused by repeat offenders. This proposed legislation ramps the time repeat offenders are required to be on interlock much more aggressively and increases the look-back period from 10 to 20 years in certain situations for counting offenses. I also learned that far too many people don't go on interlock and drive anyway. There are almost 5,000 of these driving without a license inimical to public safety offenses a year in Minnesota. So to increase the participation rate, the bill reduces barriers by not requiring payment of a significant license reinstatement fee before interlock, though the payment is still required before one completes the process. And to discourage the illegal driving of a vehicle without an interlock device, when someone is on or eligible or supposed to be on the program, these offenses, them driving without one, will be a gross misdemeanor instead of a misdemeanor. In opening up this area of law, working with my Senate counterpart and getting feedback from many stakeholders, including the Department of Public Safety, Department of Vehicle Services, several other provisions are now included. For example, I won't go through all of them, but some are to make things safer and easier for police officers when they need to impound a license during a DWI arrest, to close a gap to make sure that treatment is required for all repeat offenders, Make sure that if someone lives in Minnesota and gets a DWI in another state, that the policies we're putting in place still apply. Based on input from House research, we also took the opportunity to reorganize the statutes to make them easier to follow. That's the bill.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kraft moves to amend House Bill number 2130, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A4.
I recognize the member, Representative Kraft, who will explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So as I've learned, this is a quite complex area of law. Most of these in this amendment are technical changes and clarifications and are partly about keeping the language consistent in both bodies. The amendment touches on 4 areas: these convictions in other states, criminal vehicular homicide offenses, the contesting of interlock extensions due to administrative violations, and this gross misdemeanor language I mentioned for someone who drives without an interlock device when they're only supposed to be driving with one.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House Bill number 2130 as amended.
Third reading. Further discussion to the bill. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to thank the community of Park Nicollet for all you have done to advocate for this bill. It truly showed through what a family you are, and you were a family before this ever happened, and to watch you in action to get this started and keep it going was amazing. I want to thank the City Council, Mayor Nadia Mohammed, city staff, and the residents of St. Louis Park who wrapped their arms around the friends and family of those who were injured or killed. And I want to thank Representative Kraft. You led with compassion and thoughtfulness and followed the evidence to craft a really good bill that I hope members today will light up the board with green. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Kraft, for allowing me to work with you on this bill. This is obviously one of those days that I wish we wouldn't have to be here discussing a bill like this. Driving in Minnesota is a privilege. It's not a right. This bill prioritizes the safety of Minnesotans by keeping repeat drunk drivers off the road unless they demonstrate a real behavioral change. Longer initial interlock requirements give law enforcement and the public greater confidence that individuals with multiple offenses aren't driving impaired. No one should have to worry that their night out could turn deadly because someone with a history of impaired driving was able to keep driving. If someone has multiple DWIs, there must be serious consistent consequences. The bill ensures repeat offenders are held accountable. The hope of this bill is to move us in the right direction, to ensure that no other family or community has to go through a tragedy like this. If it saves one life and saves a family from having to go through a situation like this, it's worth it. Transportation safety goal of moving us towards 0 deaths on our roads. Thank you again, and I hope you all can support this bill.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So just really quickly, I said this in Ways and Means, but my daughter is a CAT scan technologist at Methodist Hospital, and she and her colleagues frequent that patio, as do many, many people in that community. But just, she did not know the people that were hurt, but they are one big, huge family, and so everybody knew. And Gabe was really a special person. He really left a huge impact. And so on behalf of my daughter and her colleagues, especially in the CAT scan area, the radiologists and the CAT scan technologists, thank you for doing this, because it is a huge family and they were incredibly impacted. And I do have just one question, if the author would yield for a question.
Representative Kraft will yield. Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So are there any changes in your bill to the requirement for treatment, and if so, what are they?
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question, Representative Rarick, and for your kind words. As we looked at the statutes, in most cases for multiple offenses, I think all than maybe one or so, there was already treatment that is required. And so what we put in was saying, look, if you have multiple offenses, then you should also be seeking treatment. And so that was the change. I think it was in one, there's many different parts to the interlock statute and repeat offenses. And so there was one that didn't have the treatment, so we added that.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, thank you. That is what I saw too as I was rereading that. So thank you for making that clear to the body. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I want to say a few other thanks before I close on this. I started looking at this just a few days after the tragedy in St. Louis Park, and I started by reaching out to Representative Moeller, and she gave me some good guidance on how to work and start asking questions. Representative Whitty, thank you so much for your partnership on this. Your guidance was really invaluable. My colleague in the Senate, Senator Latz, has a lot of experience in this area, so we worked this together as it passed. And then the two other folks that I really want to call out are House Research, Ben Johnson, and DFL Research, Zach Meinertz. They really dug into this. I think Ben knows this statute area better than anyone in Minnesota, and just could not have progressed without their support and help. I also want to thank the Methodist Regents folks. They truly are a family. The Park Tavern people, the family members of others impacted, all who've shared their stories with me and have helped to push and shepherd this bill along the way. As I think we all know, when you dig into an area of law, you can't fix everything. And so I tried to focus this on the repeat offenses. But along the way, I learned many things. One of the things I learned was that most people who are caught driving drunk have done it before. Some data suggests as many as 80 times. So I do ask, if anyone is listening to this, please think twice about it. It caused such a devastating hole in my community. Don't think that, boy, I can just drive a short period or do it this once. It can cause so much pain. So with that, I ask for your green vote so that we can make our roads safer and try and prevent the kind of tragedy that happened in my community from happening in yours. Thank you, members.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members participating remotely.
Hussein.
Hussein, aye.
Hussein votes aye. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 123 ayes and 5 nays, the bill as amended is passed and its title is agreed to.